Hello, and welcome to the Empowerography Podcast. This is a platform created for women's voices to be heard and a place to share their stories, journeys, and successes with the world for the purpose of helping other women who might be on similar journeys. We are empowering women one episode at a time. I'm your host, Brad Walsh, so kick back, grab one of your favorite beverages, and enjoy the stories. What if I told you the only thing standing between you and your next big opportunity is your voice? This isn't just another program. Empower Your Message is your ticket to becoming the podcast guest everyone wants. You'll learn how to craft a pitch that gets a hell yes, show up with unshakable confidence, and drop truth bombs that leave hosts and audiences wanting more. No more playing small. No more waiting for permission. It's your time to be heard. Loud, clear, and unforgettable. Visit the link in the show notes to sign up, and let's make your voice impossible to ignore. The mic is waiting. Are you ready? Hello there, Brad Walsh here, your host of the Empowerography Podcast, a podcast platform that was built and created to help elevate and amplify the voices of women through sharing their stories. Today, my guest is Lori Adams Brown. Welcome, Lori. How are you today?
Oh, it's great to see you. I'm doing really well here in sunny California. Can't complain.
It's very nice and sunny here in Toronto, too. So I can say it's nice to join you from sunny Toronto, Canada.
Love it.
So happy to have you here. Thank you for making and taking the time to be here with me today. I am so excited to jump in and share about all the beautiful light you put out into the world through the work you do, a little bit about your story and your journey. So with that being said, I am going to jump right in here. That is a lot of hats. You are the director of global talent development. You're a board member, a podcast host, a published writer, consultant to CEOs and CHROs. That's a hell of a lot. How and where do you find the time for all of this? And how important is organization and prioritization to you?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I think most women I know wear a lot of hats, so it doesn't feel super unusual in my world. I was raised by a mother who did the same, and her mother did the same. And so I think that's felt very natural for me in so many ways. And I've had some models, certainly, and mentors that have shown me how to do that. I wouldn't say as far as organization, I'm a naturally organized person. I'm not the kind of person that's going to come into your house and organize your closet for you. In fact, if you do that, please help me because I could use some help. But because I wear so many hats, right? But I would say that when it comes to how I prioritize, obviously I have a full-time job in a tech company here based in Silicon Valley. I travel globally for this work that I do, doing leadership summits for our company and our leaders, from our executives to our managers to pretty much everybody in the company, and thousands of employees globally. So that keeps me very busy. And that schedule is really set, and there's some clear boundaries around it for me that I've set. And I think within that, then my free time, quote unquote, I'm just very intentional about it. So I host a podcast, and people say, when do you find time to full-time host a podcast as well as do this work and sit on boards? And I would just say, some people golf, and so I podcast. And I do have a lot of tools, AI tools, that help me be organized and get things done easier. And the boards that I sit on are really, I sit on a couple different boards. One is How Women Lead here in Silicon Valley. I sit on the Silicon Valley Executive Board. We do things around helping women leaders be more empowered, and also have a portion of it called How Women Invest, where we invest in women founders, changing the game with the way we invest our money. And so that for me is just sort of fun. And there's a lot of friends in that group. So I have a lot of my friendships there. I sit on a board in DC that we are trying to work to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm friends with the women on the board. It's something I care about. I love doing. And so I think it's more of, and then I'm also on the advisory board of Center for Creative Leadership. But some of these things sort of bleed into each other as far as how I prioritize. Prioritizing based on purpose and impact is certainly a way that I filter a lot of that. But I lead with clarity on what drives value for business, community, and my family.
I love it. And so with you wearing so many hats, what does your morning routine look like?
If I'm in jet lag, it's early, but I'm not normally an early bird. But I do always say that I love jet lag because I get to be a fake early bird since I'm up so early when I'm like arriving in Taiwan and that kind of thing. But ordinarily, I need my cup of coffee. I was raised in Venezuela where everybody I knew drank coffee. and we had good coffee. And then I lived for many years on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia, and actually have friends that are up in the Gayo Highlands. They used to be on the team that I led, and they have the civet coffee, if you're familiar with this. So it's where the civets are free ranging. It's called luwak coffee. You may have heard of it. Okay. It's very high end, very smooth, not bitter at all, just delicious, expensive coffee. So they have these civets that free range roam around the coffee plantations. And the key is they have to be free ranging, because the key is they can smell and sniff out the best beans. So they eat them, they consume them, and then they get rid of them in ways that digestive systems do. And somehow so somehow the process of that ends up with this delicious coffee. They end up, whoever found those beans in the excrement and decided to roast them, I would love to figure out who that was. We don't know who that was. At least I don't know who that was. But it's a very expensive coffee. I find it to be very delicious. So I've lived in places with delicious coffee. I really can't start my morning without it, even when I'm in jet lag. And so that's what my morning routine looks like. I try to take a little time just to breathe and check in with myself, but I don't do that as often or as well as I would like to. That's a work in progress for me, because sometimes with a distributed global team, I wake up to messages that were sent in the night from Taiwan or maybe earlier in the day from UK. But I do try to take a beat to just check in with myself, get some coffee, breathe and check in with my family, and then head to the whatever work day looks like on my phone or my device.
That is wild about the coffee.
I know, right?
So do you get it imported in?
We did when we were in Singapore. So when I moved from Indonesia to Singapore, those friends were able to send us some coffee there. But I think that this is not unusual, honestly, for a lot of coffee places around the world, where they are more small scale. So they don't have the capacity to do large scale importing into other countries and that type of thing. Unfortunately, no. But we do. My husband and I met in college, and I introduced him to coffee. He had grown up in Southeast Asia, and they do have coffee, obviously, in Indonesia and places like that. But he grew up in Thailand. It's more of a tea culture. But I introduced him to coffee and coffee culture, and so I basically created a coffee addict. But we both love coffee, so we have a coffee club that we subscribe to, where it gives us coffee from around the world every so often, and then they'll give us a card about the plantation and who works on the farm and where the coffee comes from. And so, being global people, we love that. So it's a lot of fun.
That's really cool. So what is it that drives, motivates, and inspires you to keep going and excelling at all that you do, Lori?
Yeah, I would say that as a person who's lived in so many countries, I was born in the U.S., but quickly as a young child moved overseas and grew up in international schools in Central and South America. So Costa Rica and then Venezuela. And my friends and teachers were from all over the world. So I think growing up like that, and then marrying somebody who sort of grew up in a similar way on the other side of the world and also in international schools in a couple of different countries, that I think that I'm often thinking about this human life and how we live it and how we live it differently. And I find it very beautiful and fascinating. I find people so fascinating and really curious about how people live, and both as an individual and as cultures. So I have a degree in sociology and then a master's in intercultural studies. I'm a lifelong learner of cultures and people, and that just happens to work out really well in the work culture where I work, because I'm fascinated about how organizations work and how people bring various cultures into the workplace. So I am very inspired by that, but I'm inspired by it not just because of today and the present day, but about what are we creating as humans to leave behind for generations that come after us, because I am a mother of 3 and I look at the world they're living in, and it's not the world I thought they would be living in when I got pregnant with my children. The world has changed so drastically. And so I think what motivates me is I'm driven by the desire to create cultures where people feel safe, feel seen, and inspired to innovate and make an impact in whatever that looks like in the world around them.
Beautiful. So what inspired your journey into leadership development, and how has your perspective on leadership evolved and shifted over the years?
Certainly shifted. I would say I was inspired by a lot of great leaders that I grew up with. And in Venezuela particularly, I grew up around a lot of people wanting to make the world a better place. And that meant from the people right in front of them to more large-scale including my own mother, who's been a huge inspiration for me. And she's a medical professional and went that route. And in the same vein, she's been such a leader both in the medical world and even into government, at the intersection of government and medical work. And so I think that certainly she continues to inspire me to this day. In terms of what it has changed, I mentioned that I grew up in international schools, and that was in the 80s and 90s in Venezuela. I grew up in the industrial city of Venezuela, it's Valencia. So a lot of my classmates, their dads were presidents of multinational companies. And I will say in some ways, the corporate world has gotten better. In some ways, it's gotten worse. It depends on what we're talking about. But I grew up with this notion, I think, especially from my social studies teachers in this international school environment, that there was a lot of corporate damage being done, both on an environmental level as well as to governments, especially in the South American context. So I grew up with this notion that corporations were all bad and you would be selling your soul if you worked for one. So I didn't go that route. I went to get I got 2 bachelor's degrees in undergrad, and then I went straight to grad school and got a master's. And then my dream job was to work in nonprofit in Indonesia, which I did straight out of grad school, moved from the Bay Area straight to Indonesia, and started working with a nonprofit alongside the Ministry of Education in Indonesia, and then ended up switching into community development, where I ended up becoming involved in the disaster of the big tsunami that hit the area I was working in, Aceh province. And I would say it was in those moments of being early on in my career in these international nonprofits, working with leaders from around the world and all these different cultures, particularly when I was a liaison with the UN during the tsunami efforts. And I really began to see it more nuanced, that nonprofit isn't pure. There's a lot that goes on that shouldn't go on. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of big, maybe very wealthy billionaires that do philanthropy and want things done a certain way. And sometimes those are unethical ways. So it's not that corporate's good and corporate's bad and nonprofit's good. It's more nuanced than that. You can have nefarious people taking advantage in either one of those scenarios. And then at the same time, I began to realize as I lived in Singapore, which is more of a business context, that there's a lot of opportunity to make a difference in business. And if there's a product that I use or that I buy for my family, I believe women should be on those corporate boards. Mothers should be on those corporate boards if they're products they're buying for their families, and people who are thinking through an ethical lens. And so that's where I guess my leadership journey really made a big shift. My eyes were opened at the opportunities there that I didn't realize. And so that's where I made this career pivot into business, big corporation, and then sitting on corporate boards myself.
Who better to be a voice of products than the women who are using them and buying them for their families to use? It's common sense, but common sense isn't so common sometimes.
It's so true. It is not.
Now, Silicon Valley is a hub for innovation. Of course, a lot of people know that. How do you see leadership evolving to meet the rapid pace of the change in tech? Because as we know, technology changes and evolves so fast. So how do you see leadership evolving to meet that same rapid pace of change?
I will say that I think especially more recently, Silicon Valley has gotten a bad reputation. And I think in some ways it's well-deserved, and in some ways it's not, because it's more complicated and more nuanced than that for those of us who live and work here. So if just the word Silicon Valley make you want to vomit, I totally understand. I love living here. I love the diversity. I love the people in my industry that I interact with. So I get to sit in what I believe is very much a sweet spot in the tech world, which is the talent development portion of it all, which is absolutely rapidly changing. AI is 100% at the center of what we do. Even of all the HR functions, talent development is maybe one at the top or the second portion of these categories within HR that is most being changed by AI. And so I have a lot of optimism about AI in terms of how I'm currently using it and partnering with it, and also some of the maybe same fears that a lot of you do as well. And so I think that I'm very cautiously optimistic, and I'm very optimistic about it. And I think that shaping AI has been something sort of like the reason I became a part of the corporate world and wanted to lead within it and I'm getting on corporate boards as well, is that I want to be somebody who AI is here, like it or not. So that's within the locus of control of what we cannot change. but I use it. I know that women statistically use it less, and I really hope that changes, because I do think that as we use it, we create it and we speak into it. And I have arguments with AI occasionally. I don't know what that says about me, but I do have a therapist, so don't worry. But if AI says some gender stereotypes to me as a woman, I will let him know. Or if he mansplains me too much, we've had these conversations. But anyway, I do think that it is an exciting time. It is evolving. I love the women in STEM who are really making a difference. I think hybrid work is evolving. We're seeing a lot of return to office, increasingly so in Fortune 500 and even Fortune 100 companies right now. Don't believe that women are being listened to and heard well enough in that space, but I hope that changes. We know that women and mothers in particular really benefit from the flexibility. And let's just be honest, moms get stuff done and you want them on your team. Yeah. I want them on my team. I don't want to lose my mom or some of my most top performers. I think global competition is demanding, though, a more inclusive, adaptive, and emotionally intelligent leadership. Leadership is changing, and it's changing at the heart of Silicon Valley. So I believe that the future is human-centered. So when I'm training in talent development or speaking at conferences, writing articles, I sort of word it this way. When people say AI took over my job, that's a question I get a lot. And I think I used to say something along the lines of what I heard other people in talent development here saying, which is AI won't take over your job, but the person who knows AI will take over your job. I always added the person who knows AI but is human-centered in their approach. I'm not saying that exactly anymore, because the reality is in the last few weeks, we have seen AI take jobs. So I think that we have to be honest about the fact that does happen. But at the same time, AI is creating jobs and transforming jobs, including mine. I've been on multiple work calls, even today, about AI, how I've created an AI agent to do some AI coaching within the company. There's all kinds of things going on with that. Are we going to keep that, do something else, blah, blah, blah. It's transforming everything I do in my work. And so I think that's part of leadership evolving. But I hope that we human-centered approach, because we created AI. We should still be the ones checking it, making sure it's factual, it does make mistakes, and making sure it's human-centered, especially emotionally intelligent.
I keep hearing people, and I know that there's a huge fear around AI, and understandably, I get it, just as you were saying. And I keep hearing people say that AI, we are creating such powerful AI, it is going to be smarter than we are. I hear that a lot. Like, a lot of people are saying that, and it's going to take over.
These are the fears, right? Yeah. And so, yes, what's going on? We have the U.S. government releasing some plans around AI. I get a little leery, because just where my politics lie and the fears I have around the current administration and what that looks like, and some ethical considerations. There's a lot of lack of integrity at the very top of our government. So that does cause me a lot of fear. Getting it involved in our Department of Defense is absolutely terrifying. I do believe that it will be more intelligent than us, in some ways already maybe is. So I'm seeing some areas where it's better at eliminating bias than the average human. And I think that's a good thing. Will it still have bias in it? I believe it is, because so much of it was created by people from a more narrow perspective. So that's why I also advocate that women should be involved in the creation of it as it goes forward, and using it to help it keep learning from our perspectives and not a more narrow perspective.
Yeah. And so what is one defining moment in your career that completely shifted how you see leadership and talent development?
There's been some smaller ones, medium-sized ones, but I think that the big one I always point to is what I mentioned earlier about leading in the post-tsunami humanitarian efforts in Indonesia. It really taught me more about the nuances of cultures and how leadership looks within global nonprofits, governments, and military. I was meeting people from all different military groups around the world, different countries that were there. And it was everything from giving water to food. Right. Our nonprofit I was working with was trying to even do things like body removal. It was just a very chaotic time. And it was traumatic for those who went through it. My friends that lost their children. I mean, I knew people from before that when I had been working there. And then, so I knew people that one of my best friends lost her baby. But I met people afterwards that I hadn't known before, just in the work, who had lost babies or loved ones or all of their children. So many heartbreaking stories. And so that fundamentally changes you as a person. There'll never be a December 26th where I don't cry. I'm not a big crier, but I just take time to remember my friend Nana and Aya and their baby, and who was just a few months older than mine, and when it happened. And I remember holding my baby at night and rocking him to sleep and crying and wondering why my baby lived and her baby didn't. I don't have answers to those questions, but it has compelled me to want to continue to make the world a better place, to work alongside people who come in and maybe have different ways from different cultures and governments and NGOs of how to lead, but that we can find alignment and common ground and not do two different types of work. I think alignment is important to me after watching those efforts. You don't want to have all the trucks going from Medan to Banda Aceh with antibiotics. Some need to have tents, and some need to have food, and some need to have water. You need to really make sure workload is being shared. And so that whole teamwork effort and alignment piece was important. But the cross-cultural communication piece became more solidified for me in that environment, that you absolutely need cross-cultural skills to lead, whether it's in global nonprofit efforts or in a global company. And so I would say that I've really been somewhat disappointed to be, when I moved from Singapore to Silicon Valley, to realize that even in Silicon Valley, it can be very American, and I don't mean that in a positive way. I'm a U.S. citizen, but we don't have a great reputation overseas. Sometimes it can feel a little bit narcissistic to other cultures, and that's a very valid response. But I've been surprised at how many global roles there are in Silicon Valley that are just held by people who have almost no cross-cultural skills, that will go on business trips overseas to Singapore or to China or Taiwan or all over Europe and South America, and they just show up very American and don't adapt at all. And I have been very shocked that even in Silicon Valley, with all our diversity, how many white men who speak no other languages, who've not really interacted with other cultures enough to try to learn how to adapt, just get these roles because they're seen as a leader. And I hope that changes, because I think we can do better, both by upskilling those men, those white men, challenging them to go get a certification, go learn, bring a cultural guide alongside you, but also realizing there are people who are very skilled at this. So hire them for those roles because they're really good at it.
They're qualified people.
Yeah.
You got to send the qualified people. It doesn't matter what race, what color they are. They've hire the people who are skilled at those jobs.
Yes. Absolutely.
Plain and simple.
It should be.
It should be. It sounds very simple, but of course, corporate structure, company structures, there's so many layers to it, and it doesn't always, more often than not, it probably doesn't work out the way it should because of these layers.
Yes. Sometimes it's just the loudest person in the room that gets the job.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's very American, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I can remember when I went to Europe. I did a backpacking trip through Europe for 2.5 months, and we met some Americans. We met a lot of Americans on the trip, but a lot of them we found were wanting Canadian flags to sew on their backpack.
Oh, yeah.
Because they didn't want to be recognized as Americans.
It's very common.
And I can remember being in different pubs and whatnot, and undoubtedly, with every time you turn around, there's loud, boisterous. They're from America.
Always.
You got to tone it down a little bit and adapt to the culture that you're in. You have to.
Yes, I think that I still think this is the year 2025, and there are so many people that don't get that, work in global business and travel all over the world on business trips and still don't get that at all.
It's pretty basic, really. But for some people, I guess it's just too much to ask to adapt to other cultures. I'm not saying change who you are, but at least go out of your way to make an effort. At least make an effort.
Yeah, because I don't know. Nobody loves a know-it-all. And I think Americans, and those types of Americans, the ugly American stereotype, they come across as a know-it-all. And I encounter people like that sometimes here in Silicon Valley in the tech world, who are in these roles. And I think that I'll mention things about communication or cross-cultural communication. I think what they often hear is, oh, that's super fluffy, touchy-feely. Nobody needs that. And I'm sitting there going, billions of dollars are being lost because you did not communicate with a Japanese person who expected you to read the air. And you were this very direct communicator, and you just missed each other. And that $1 billion deal didn't happen because maybe learning to communicate cross-culturally would have been a very good business skill that's a leadership competency and not a nice to have or a woke concept. It's actually business critical in my perspective.
Yeah, I think that we need to, and I think it is shifting a little bit, but it needs to shift more the very masculine do in the boardroom type behavior. It needs to be more emotional IQ as opposed to the brain IQ. And there's nothing wrong with bringing that into the boardroom. It needs to be brought in. Women have to stop, and I understand why they've had to adopt this male energy and be the badass, the brash woman, but then they get chastised for it. Oh, she's a bitch. She's this,
Yep.
she's that. No. How about we just shift the way we look at things, and women shouldn't have to adopt male energy in order to succeed or in order to get their voices heard in a boardroom. It's ridiculous. We need to change that. We need to have more conversations around it, which will help to shift that mindset and shift that belief and the way that we're doing things. It needs to change. The world is changing. We have to change with it.
The world is changing and leadership is changing. And I do spend so much of the time in the key leadership program I've developed for all our global leaders, which has been very successful, by the way. And we've increased manager competence and manager satisfaction. And we've increased things such as our employee voice and employees speaking up because of cultivating this. And it's been because of EQ and CQ, so emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence skills, that some might look at those trainings and think, oh, I know how to listen. But when people say that, I always think, you need my training, because I've trained it millions of times and I'm still a work in progress. If you think you have this figured out, ooh, red flag. So yeah, and a lot gets missed. But I think in the boardroom, to your point, yes, absolutely. If you're just regurgitating information, or even in a town hall with your company as an executive, and people, they tune out. People care about stories. They lean in when there's feeling. I'm not on the Myers-Briggs. I'm a strong T off the chart. So I don't make my decisions based on feelings, but I'm human and I have feelings, and we all do. And I care about things. And so when I don't show those, there's less connection. So in terms of connecting with people all around the world, just being human-centered and being a human ourselves instead of showing up like a robot, that's how we move forward. I tell people in our trainings, AI, yes, it's taking over jobs. It's transforming jobs. It's creating jobs. But what I don't want is for you or me to be the robots. Let's let AI be the robot. Yeah. It does it better than us. And let's be human, because we do that well, and increasingly be human. I do think that as leadership is changing, what I hope is, like you said, women don't have to show up with the masculine energy, that we need to allow men to not have to show up like that, because it's a burden for them too. So that all of us can be released to just be human.
Yes. Connection is everything. And to your point about the listening, that makes me laugh, because so many people out there think they are good listeners and they really are not. They really don't know how to listen. And that is something that is a very valuable and important skill set to possess, that more people need to learn how to listen, because there's a lot of people that have no idea how to listen. It needs to change.
It's honestly so common. And like I said, I'm still a work in progress. There's a lot of, I think the more you know, the more you realize, ooh. And if you get 360 evaluations, most people say, I'm really good at this thing. And it's, no, you're not. Most people have blind spots about how they communicate. Oh, I'm so good at hearing people. So facts, feelings, values. I'm a facts listener. I struggle to listen for feelings and values. And it's a lot of work for my brain to adapt to those. And I train on that, and I'm still working on it. So.
We could all always improve on things in so many areas. How do you personally define success in leadership, not just in business, but also in life?
So I think that if I say this a lot in the workplace where I train, leadership isn't about a title. So if you have influence, you're a leader. So you could be an individual contributor in your workplace, working on the manufacturing floor and have no direct reports. But if you have influence among your peers and on that line that you're working on, then you're a leader. And if people look to you for advice or to set the tone, or you bear the emotional labor of your workplace, you're volunteering in your PTA, all these are opportunities to have leadership and influence. And so I really think that impact is more about what leadership is about. So if people thrive under your leadership, under your influence, then to me, that's a success. Are you making the world better? Are you helping people be more themselves? And find who they are and celebrate those strengths, draw those strengths out of people, and help them to continue to make choices for themselves where they continue to live out of those strengths every day. If you bring that out in people, you're a successful leader.
Yeah. In your experience then, Lori, what are the biggest leadership myths, or one of the biggest leadership myths that needs to be broken?
I think leaders sometimes feel they need all the answers and no one has them, not even AI apparently, because AI gets it wrong too. And I think in the American context and corporate, what I've seen, like I mentioned, is just being the loudest person in the room. To me, I love having introverts on my team. They have the best insights. So I often want to say to them, what did you get out of that meeting? And they're observing sometimes more the body language and the interactions between people. And people, for example, in Taiwan or some East Asian cultures, they're not going to raise their hand in our trainings because culturally that tends to not be as common. But they have a lot to say. And so sometimes it's looking for those bright eyes in the room. So I think it's not about being the loudest or the person who brags the most, which, as you mentioned, women can't get away with as much as men do.
Yeah.
And also men walk in the door, I would say, especially white men in the US and probably the UK, Canada, all these contexts where white people are the dominant culture, right? If white men walk into the room, they're seen for their potential. People say, oh, do you want to come into this meetings they don't even belong into? It's like, can we promote you? Maybe it's not that bad, but sometimes it is.
Yeah.
But women have to prove ourselves again and again. And so we're often only seen for our experience, and the experience has to all be there, which is why you often hear women don't apply for jobs unless they are 80 or 100% of the qualification, whereas men, it's sometimes 20% or less. They think, because they've had that lived experience that they don't have to have. You don't have to have cross-cultural skills to get these jobs, but women are expected to do all the things and have all the things and have the degrees and have umpteen years of experience. And so I think that is a big leadership myth too, that just men by default are leaders, white men are leaders. I think it's changing here in the U.S. I can't remember what it was. They do these little things with children where they have them draw a particular job. So I remember when I led one of the scout troops for one of my kids, and we did an exercise when they were in 4th grade about draw a librarian and draw a scientist. And it was interesting to see what gender they drew. We are seeing often librarians will be drawn as women and scientists will be drawn as men, but we're starting to see some of those gender stereotypes change in the younger generations, not nearly to the degree that we want. But I think some of the leadership myth would just be that men are better leaders in general. They're more likely, they're going to be the president of the company, they're going to be on the board. When people think board, they think men. And often white men will be golfing with white men and give white men roles on the board instead of even thinking that a woman would be on a corporate board. So that's some of the leadership myths that I think are there, that we gender stereotype that way too much instead of do it based on skills.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So much shit needs to change.
Oh my gosh.
So much.
Yeah.
How do we redefine leadership in a way that includes more diverse voices, perspectives, and lived experiences?
I think so much of it, and this is my lens of sociology from my degrees, is about the systems. So we have to create systemic access. Some of our systems that have been built by certain people for certain people don't allow other people in. And they will say this is a meritocracy when in fact maybe this workplace that I work in was built in 1920 or maybe earlier than that, before women even had the right to vote in the United States. And so before women could own bank accounts in 1974. So all of this system would have been built largely for white men. And yet the system has changed. And so to your point of women having to show up with this masculine energy, the system doesn't allow them to show up as themselves. So I think that a lot of it is that access, different perspectives and different lived experiences. It's not just visual, it's very cognitive. So cognitive diversity is something I hear a lot about in the corporate board space. It's very valuable because when you get into groupthink, it's absolutely dangerous and very risky for business to have groupthink. You end up with activist stakeholders that start boycotting Target, for example, which I still am, even though I love Target, I'm not shopping there right now because of their DEI with their board. And these are just ways that we can vote with our dollars kind of thing, including women investing in women-owned companies. That's another way to vote with our values by using our money. But so that diversity on a corporate board, for example, or an executive team in a company if there's not different lived experiences, different people who understand the different products who might buy those products. For example, a mom. If you're a company that sells baby products and your entire corporate board is men who've never been stay-at-home dads, and all of your executive team is men who've not been helping raise the children at home, but they've had you're going to miss everything about the baby products.
Yes, of course.
So it doesn't make sense for business. So that diversity cognitively, experientially, in terms of the lived experiences people have had. Are there Southeast Asian markets you're trying to get into? Probably a good idea to have somebody on your board that is from Southeast Asia and or has lived there as an expat for at least 10 years and understands the market. Cultural differences. These are not all just visual, but it's how people think and how they've experienced the world, and it's very valuable.
For sure. Thank you for that. What unique strengths, then, do you think, in your opinion, women bring to leadership, and how can we start to amplify those strengths in corporate spaces?
I would say that having lived around the world, what it means to be a woman looks very different in every culture I've lived in. For example, when I lived in the province where the tsunami happened, I was there in the Civil War time prior to the tsunami. It's an Islamic law, so Sharia law province. So I wore hijab and no alcohol, no pork, don't paint your fingernails. Abided by all those cultural practices because I didn't want to be the ugly American. As long as it didn't infringe upon my personal values or my faith, I did what I could to assimilate to their culture and their way of life. And so all that to say, being a woman there, it looked very different. It was very narrow in some ways. And yet there was a strength within that by getting involved in community efforts with some of the women, starting some sort of grassroots community groups, such as some of the women and the moms after the tsunami who were dealing with a lot of trauma and that kind of thing, having groups for them and just learning and listening to the women and getting into their lives through work and just being in the community. I learned a lot about what it meant to be a woman there and the different things they face. But I grew up in Venezuela, which has a lot of machismo, but some would describe it as more of a matriarchal culture and aspects of it. And so it's very complicated. It's not at all like what it looks like the Puritans that came from England to the U.S. that settled here, and this kind of Victorian puritanical culture they brought into the U.S. white culture, and how that patriarchy looks is very different. So I'd say there's a lot of nuances around the world. The people group just south of the Acehnese people in Sumatra and Indonesia where I worked, they were also Muslim, but their Islam sort of had this understanding of how they adapted it to their culture because it is a matrilineal culture. So they prefer to have baby girls and they pass the property on to the girls and when the women own it and pass it on. And so they're called the Minangkabau people. You can look them up. So they do practice Islam, but they also are matrilineal. So those are things that I don't know negotiated early on with their acceptance of it. So all that to say, it's hard to say strictly what it means for women to bring as a strength. But I will say, by and large, my experience has been in all of these cultures, women tend to be more social in particular way throughout these cultures. And so it's hard to grow up as a little girl and become a woman without gaining certain skills relationally in all of the cultures where I've lived and worked. And that would be, maybe you're not naturally an empathetic person, but you probably learn skills around empathy by being a girl and being raised as a woman, because it's the reciprocity of friendships and relationships is so common, and it's much less transactional and more transformational in the relationships among women. And so I would think those are strengths in the workplace, that you bring empathy, collaboration, that there's an intuition sometimes, and there's recent research on the biology of women and their brains that has given some more insight. I've not described myself as an overly intuitive person. Once again, on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an S and sensory instead of an N, so sensing. So intuitive isn't necessarily how I take in information, but I have realized I do have a certain level of being able to see around the corner. Maybe it's a risk management that a lot of women have. And so I think where we've seen over time, some women get called hysterical. And if you're not seeing this on video, it's in quotes with my fingers. There's no male equivalent of the word hysterical, although some women in my circles have tried to make one up, and it's just actually pretty funny. But there's a lot of things that are stereotypes don't have a male equivalent. So it might be a slur or a way to discredit a woman. And then there's no male equivalent. And so being hysterical is one of those. And there's a long history of women being put in insane asylums, getting lobotomies, being called witches, being burned, all those things throughout history. But I think that maybe biologically there is some truth to what we're finding, and it's that women are often either we're socialized or biologically or both given this ability to see that's a risk. And so maybe we shouldn't go that way. That's why they're so valuable on boards. Once again, for risk management, it's you don't want to go down a path that's going to make you lose. I think a case in point would be at the Coldplay concert recently here in the United States, where we saw a CEO and a chief people officer on the kiss cam, and they were having an affair. And now he's had to step down, and the whole company is at risk. We've got Tiger Woods pulling out his investments. This is a risk. So if, I don't know, were there women on the executive team that said maybe we should hold them to an ethical standard? Maybe they didn't. Maybe their voices were welcome. Maybe they weren't. Or maybe it was a man that did. But whoever thought those things and maybe did or didn't say them, that risk management should have been listened to. It could have saved a lot of money for the company. And having to rebuild a reputation it's very difficult to do without just rebranding. So I think there is something about that with women that have been called hysterical. So if you have women in your life and they say, oh, you should put the seatbelt on that baby, or maybe you should wear a helmet, or maybe I feel weird about going down that street, maybe you shouldn't go down there. Please don't call her hysterical. Please stop and think maybe there's something biologically or sociologically or both going on with her where we should listen to that instead of just patting her on the head and saying, oh, you just worry all the time. Because the reality is she could be warning you about something that maybe you haven't perceived. But also I think involved in this is that sometimes men have been raised in this world where they see themselves as the default. They see themselves as the smarter ones. And they see women as emotional and hysterical and maybe not overtly. And I'm talking about even the good guys, even the egalitarians, even the feminist men sometimes are raised this way to downplay when a woman warns about something. And so I think that is something to keep an eye on and for us to keep discussing and be curious about. But I would just say overall, believe women, listen to them. Their warnings are often there for a reason.
Women's intuition.
Yep.
That's it. What advice would you give to women who aspire to leadership, but maybe they feel like they don't fit the traditional mold of leadership?
I've certainly felt this way. And I would start by saying you're not alone. And it's understandable that you feel this way. As I do, and many of us have and still do. And the value of us coming together as women and supporting each other is that one of the oldest tricks in the book, whether you study sociology or government or just have read the average tyrant playbook, is divide and conquer. And patriarchy in its system is trying to really destroy all of us because it's not good for men and boys. It's also not good for women and girls. But what it's trying to do is divide women from each other and pit us against each other. But our strength is each other, supporting each other. I get to be a part of incredible women-led organizations that are very positive, and we encourage each other and support each other, including How Women Lead, the board I sit on. It's a great organization. So I would say you don't need to fit the mold because you are the mold breaker. And so being a woman leader is a mold breaker in patriarchy. And so just keep going.
You still see, though, and I don't think we see as much of it now, but you still see a lot of competition among women and this lack, but it comes, I know where it comes from. It comes from lack mindset. It comes from the conditioning that women have had to fight for those positions because there were so few to begin with, which is understandable. So how do we start to shift that and stop the competition? Because there's more than enough to go around for everybody. I don't care who you are. I don't care what industry you're in. Competition is a bullshit mindset. It's not real. It's not true. There is more than enough abundance for everybody. So how do we, I know part of it is through conversation, having conversations like this, talking about it, but what other ways can we start to shift so that women aren't in competition and still stepping on each other to get ahead?
I will say that it does start in very micro ways a lot of times, just helping women in your life know that you believe that a rising tide raises all boats and that you live out what you say, where you practice, I guess, what you preach, where you say, hey, I want to be helpful to you. What are you looking for? Is there a role you're looking for? Can I introduce you to someone? I've had many women say, my network is your network. In terms of how women lead, we have a credo. So Julie Castro Abrams is just one of the best leaders I've ever been around, which is high praise because I've been around a lot of incredible leaders in my life. But she really just, we don't have mean girls here. We don't do competition. And so if that's what you're looking for, there's other groups for you. But we really do support one another. And you'll see if there's a post about how women lead on LinkedIn or something, you'll see a lot of us on there saying, supporting each other even in the comments. And so maybe that's one way to learn about that. It's not about a scarcity mentality. It's an abundance mentality. And the reality is women are, since 1974, able to own our own bank accounts. And we are very educated in the United States here to be able to get certain jobs. Is it equitable with pay and all that? Still, it's not. Are there a lot of barriers? Yes. Are women making it to the bottom rung? It's still a problem. But at the same time, we are seeing a huge shift of wealth transfer that's about to happen over the next few years, where women are going to be inheriting a lot of the boomer wealth as they pass along. And it's going to change the game with how wealth is held in this country. So like it or not, there is more opportunity out there. And I think embracing that and understanding that there's plenty to go around. And I think a lot of women groups I'm in that are very positive, including How Women Lead and some others called Alley to Valley and different groups, we do this thing where we do asks and offers to each other. And so I think men are often raised to make deals with each other, whether they're on the golf course or who knows where you guys do your deal. I don't know. At the bar, I'm not sure, but everywhere seems to be fair game to just make deals. Women are often told that's not okay. Don't make deals or only make them in these situations. And so I think opening those doors to say it's okay to do that here. Women often need permission to break those rules we've been raised with. And so to say this is an ask and offer community. So I have a lot of women in my life that say, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a corporate board seat in a biotech company. I bring this experience. And then they say, my offer to you is, I have a podcast. Would you like to be interviewed? Whatever it is. So just asking, offering, so it feels reciprocal, which really is consistent with how women's friendships are expected to be.
So okay, I love all of that. Thank you for sharing that. But what do you do in a situation? Because I think about my wife's work. She works in the hospital, and of course, it's predominantly women. There is a shit ton of women stepping all over each other. How do you change when you're in it? How do you change that where there's so much of it and you're not like that? How do you like that? That seems like you're pushing a massive boulder uphill. How the fuck do you change that?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, that's huge.
It's huge. I hear a lot of toxic stuff going on in healthcare, and I think a lot of people in healthcare are also burnt out. And so I think Canada has a very different system. It's so much better in a lot of ways than what we have. But regardless, if you're a nurse, registered nurse, or whatever your role is, if you're a doctor, there's just weird hours, hard hours. And so I think one of the things we see that happen in the brain is with burnout, sometimes empathy gets diminished. And so I think that's part of it is the more burnt out people are, the more competitive it gets and the less they have the empathy for other people. And with managers and systems not changing from the outside, I think the locus of control is to change what you can and to treat people differently. And you can only change what you have within your own influence. And I do believe that over time, people, just like that Maya Angelou quote, they remember how you make them feel. And even if you move on to another healthcare clinic or hospital and other people that you've worked with before join you, they'll remember who you were and how you made them feel. And that matters. Okay.
If you could change one belief or behavior in the world of leadership, what would it be and why?
One belief I think would have to be that there's only one certain kind of leader for particular roles. I think that it's a bit of a scarcity mentality as well within leadership and not understanding there's just not one or two possibilities. There's endless possibilities. And so on the recruiting side, if you're recruiting, for example, for an executive in your company, if you're an executive recruiter, if you're a team manager and you're looking for a new direct report for your team, I just think blowing up the possibilities and beginning to imagine and dream what that person can look like will give you more different perspectives of people that you work with. And I think that's always a good thing.
And so when all is said and done, what do you want your leadership legacy to be?
I guess I really hope that people have become more themselves after having been around me, if they've understood and been inspired to speak up with their own voice, to live out of their own strengths, and to make the world a better place, whether it's just the world right in front of them or large global macroeconomic shifts, whatever their differences they're making, that they have felt that they could be more empowered and inspired to do that with the gifts that they have, their own God-given gifts, as a result of having been around me.
I love it. What is one tip or takeaway that you can share with the listeners that they could implement immediately to start to embrace their inner leader and recondition their mind for the success that they want?
I think that so many of the problems in the world can be solved with just human kindness. So I'm a huge fan of Jacinda Ardern, just like unabashedly so, embarrassingly so, honestly. I just love her so much. She probably should never come around me because I'll just hug her so tight and their security will get involved. But I've been following her career since I lived in Singapore, and she was the Prime Minister of New Zealand and was leading simultaneously, because the world is a wacky place, at the same time as Donald Trump's first term here in the United States. So I was in Singapore watching how she was leading, and then terrorist attacks happening, and the way she came and she empathized and she cared, and she gave birth to a baby while she was in office and just showed us what it was like to be a mother in this situation. And just all these things. She led during COVID, made some very strong decisions. Obviously, every decision any leader made in that situation was controversial, but she made a very human-centered, caring, kind decision. And those are very often unpopular and seen as not strong. And so I think one of her quotes that I love the most is, "I refuse to believe a leader can't be both kind and strong, that kindness is a strength." And she actually has a new book out called A Different Kind of Power, which I love the word different. I'm glad the word different hasn't been commandeered here by people who call things woke, because my podcast is called A World of Difference. So I love the word different, and I'm glad she used it. And I see the world through the lens of power quite a bit because of my personality, my upbringing, and also my sociology degrees. And so I love that she's talking about a different kind of power. I think she brings a different kind of power. And so she's now going around speaking about her book. But I think that if there's one thing I could say, it's kindness, and human-centered kindness is so important, however you lead and whatever you do.
We need more of it for sure. I think there needs to be a course created to teach people how to be kind. I really believe that with all of my heart, because there's a lot of hatred and divisiveness in the world right now, and we could use as much kindness as we can possibly get. So I think I need to create a course on kindness, or somebody does. It needs to happen, because there's a lot of people that need that help and support in learning how to be kind, for sure. How is your humanitarian... Sorry, we're going to say something?
I was just going to add, is in terms of a tip, something I train on with that, how to implement kindness, is just creating and cultivating that psychological safety. It's really important in business, but it's important in all types of teams that you might lead or be on. And so Google had this Project Aristotle years ago where they did a study on their most successful teams and managers. And they came out with the most successful teams for cultivating psychological safety. And what that did was it allowed people to push back against a leader and have a difference of opinion, to say, I'm not sure if that will work, or that's risky, or that feels unsafe, or anything that might push back. And so when you cultivate a situation where people's voices are heard and welcomed, it's actually really good for innovation and business, and it helps you see around corners, and it's a strategic advantage. But also, incidentally, it turns out it's just very good for humans and the way we want to be on teams. So people will stay in jobs, they'll keep working with managers, and they'll live happier lives when they have that psychological safety. So I would say, whether you're a parent, creating that psychological safety for your teenagers when they start finding out who they are and pushing the boundaries and saying things that make your eyebrows raise, and just to hear them. Doesn't mean you condone everything or say everything's okay, but it's just that safety to push back. That psychological safety is really key. And you can start implementing that in your next meeting with curiosity and not control.
There we go. Curiosity is the key. How has your humanitarian and philanthropic work influenced your perspective on leadership and personal fulfillment?
Yeah, I think that decisions affect humans. I saw that very clearly in the nonprofit world that I grew up in, with parents who were working in nonprofit overseas. And then in the early parts of my career, people at the tops of governments, whether it's the Indonesian government, Singaporean government, Venezuelan government, U.S. government, these decisions, they affect people. It might look like a number on a spreadsheet to somebody in the parliament or in Congress, but these are people. These are human lives. families. And so I think that's really helped shape my leadership because it's true in business as well. So when you're talking about talent development, talent management, who gets promotions, how you write somebody's performance review, are you going to lean into bias and stereotypes and do what often happens on performance reviews where men get very little critical feedback. I think it's 2% or less. And women, it was something like over 80% of it is critical. And this is my lived experience too. People just feel women get competence questioning all the time. I get it in so many meetings, whether it's just everywhere. They just assume nobody even thinks about it. Here's where it's shown up a few times lately. Nobody's an expert in AI right now except for about 5 people who all live here in Silicon Valley. But I don't know those 5 people who created OpenAI and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're all figuring it out. But I've been in conversations with men in the past couple of months where they will start telling me all about AI as if they're an expert and come across as this very much know-it-all. And I spend a lot of my time working in AI and trying to figure it out. But the assumption is I know nothing. And that's just the way the world has worked here for so long. So it's not that I'm blaming anyone. It's just very normal. But I think that knowing that your decisions and how you talk and how you write somebody up on a performance review, whether you promote them, whether you give a job to this person, whether you just interview mostly men for the job or you actually care about interviewing women or people of color, all those things, these decisions affect humans. And it's not just in philanthropy, but it's also in business and government and it's in academia, because wherever there are humans, decisions affect human lives. So it keeps leadership real, and I hope it keeps us humble.
Yeah. What has been one of the most profound lessons you've learned from your work in philanthropy?
I think that proximity can breed empathy. So I'm much more empathetic about what it means to live under Sharia law as a woman, because I did that. And I'll never completely understand what it's like to be born and raised there and live there until my entire life. But I have a certain level of understanding, whereas just reading books gave me some of that, but being there and living how people live did much more. And so I would say that here in the United States, especially here in California, we have a lot of ICE raids going on where they're coming and snatching. Especially Latinos are being targeted, especially Venezuelans, the country I love that I grew up in, that very warmly welcomed me and raised me and taught me so much about leadership and empathy and many things. But they're being targeted in workplaces, out in fields where we're being fed by these farmers. And so there's a lot of people in this narrative that will be very cold and lack empathy, but not always, but a huge chunk of the time, they don't actually know people in this category. So they don't understand who these people are and how they live and what their lives are like and the names of their children and their stories of walking from Venezuela all across the Darien Gap, and 90% of them men and women being sexually assaulted before they even get to our border to seek asylum. They don't know these personal stories. And so they can sort of other them or put them in this category of criminal or quote unquote illegal alien. The word alien, I just think why are we using that? I don't know. It sounds like brain monsters on spaceships that do sound scary, but these are people. And so I think that proximity can lead to empathy. And it certainly did for me in many situations where I lived. And you really can't solve what you don't understand up close.
For sure. Absolutely. How do you personally stay grounded and resilient while managing such a demanding career?
Nature is a big one for me. I do love it so much, and I'm blessed to be here in Northern California where we have a lot of beautiful nature. So I have redwoods on the block where I live. It's just ridiculous to say out loud. My kids go to a high school where there's redwoods at the high school, and we are about 20 minutes from Santa Cruz, this beautiful beach where surfing first entered the United States. And it's got these gorgeous cliffs, and sometimes when days are hard or just when I need to be grounded, I go and sit and read, have a cup of coffee on the cliffs and just look at the ocean and watch the waves crash. And I have a lot more understanding of the neurology of it all because I basically nerd out on that sometimes. And so I just think it's super fascinating how people work and how our systems work. And so neurologically, there's some research that shows people are happier when they live in these certain proximity of the beach. And the ocean has always been a special place for me. I grew up in the Caribbean. And then I feel like I've lived on islands most of my life until I came here, but our beaches are cold, which I'm not a huge fan of, but they're beautiful. But it still does the same thing, which is that there is a level of what happens. There's these ions, I guess, in the water that end up interacting with our bodies when we're near the ocean, whatever it is. And then the rhythms of how the ocean waves work, they set our breathing to a different pace. So you can get that breathing on your own by just doing like the 4-6-8 count breathing, if you've ever done that one. But it's so much, your body naturally regulates the breathing by being near the ocean waves. And so it's really been very grounding for me. If I can put my toes in the sand, especially literal grounding, it's been very helpful for me in a high stress job. I've also done therapy. So I don't know. I have always been a big believer in therapy in the same way that I charge my electric vehicle or put gas in my gas car, that get it oil changed and upkeeps, that I just have therapists that I check in with. Life's hard. Most of us don't get through it without some level of trauma. And so that's another way that I stay grounded, increasing self-awareness, which I think is a leadership skill, but I do that best through therapy. I'd say my family keeps me grounded. They never let me think too highly of myself, but they also respect me and care for me. So in the best possible way, especially with teenagers. And then I think just a strong sense of calling it helps me stay grounded too.
Nature is key. Getting out in nature and stepping away from the computer and just being in fresh air and being in nature is huge. It's everything.
It's everything.
It really is. Whether that's just going for a walk somewhere, getting out and moving your body, walking, being out in the fresh air, enjoying the sunshine. You may not have a beach near you, and that's okay. Just go for a walk, get out. There's trees everywhere.
Exactly. And flowers. We're blessed with all your round flowers in California also. Just move here, guys. It's very expensive, but you get all year round flowers, not just sells.
There you go. Now, as mentioned off the top, you're a podcast host. Can you share with the audience the name of the podcast, all the things about the podcast?
Yeah, so it's called A World of Difference. It invites different voices of authentic leaders globally, exploring how difference drives innovation and impact. I do interview based mostly with global leaders and change makers of different types. So yeah, I'd love for you to join us and listen. You can go to worldoftdifferencepodcast.com to check us out.
How long have you been doing the podcast now?
I'm about to have the 5th anniversary, and I can't even really believe it's been that long because I started in COVID.
Congratulations.
And COVID years felt bizarre. And then now we're in Donald Trump. So it feels like Donald Trump years, but it's actually only been 6 months of his presidency. But it felt like the last 7 years has just gone by. But anyway, in August, I'll celebrate 5 years of podcasting.
Congratulations. Good for you. That's huge. That's a milestone.
It is.
What do you think your unique skill set or superpower is that's helped you become successful?
I would say that I'll never stop being grateful for being raised around the world in international schools with friends and teachers from everywhere. I can't believe that's the privilege I have been given. And so I would say cultural fluency. And I say that in the sense that nobody knows everything about every culture. It's pretty much impossible to do. But it's given me a curiosity to learn and to know and to pick up a thing here and there. And that curiosity has given me more fascination with people and how they live and work. And it's made me a better person. I've been changed by the cultures I've lived in. I carry little pieces of each culture that has formed me as a child, and then those I've lived in when I was overseas as an expat for 20 years in Southeast Asia. And every place I've lived and traveled, and friends my kids have had in their international schools too, their cultures that they invited us into, and their homes and their food and traditions and all of those things. So I would say cultural fluency would be a superpower. Living on 3 continents, speaking 6 languages, it's helped me see patterns that maybe others miss. And it's helped me know there's lots of different ways to do this or be a leader.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't use that superpower in some way.
Lived experience, nothing compares to. You can read about all these places in as many books as you want, but until you've actually been there and spent time there, it's nothing compared to. So that, I think that's incredible, the upbringing you've had, and to be able to get those experiences, because not a lot of people get those opportunities.
Yeah, I feel like is it Spider-Man that they say with great power comes great responsibility? Yes. I'm no superhero by any stretch of the imagination, But I do have kids that love Marvel and DC and all those things. We recently saw the new Superman, and I know people think he's woke, but we think he was awesome. Especially his dog. His dog was super cute, crypto. Oh my gosh. A lot like our dog, Luna. She's so crypto. But anyway, yeah, I would say that, yeah, there's something really, I guess, special about having something given to you. Whatever that is, you could have a very traumatic, difficult childhood. And I know people very close to me that have had those. And somehow they come away with a gift that is a privilege that ends up being a superpower. Even if it's the ability to pick out a narcissist in a room, that is a superpower. Please tell us if you see one. If they're going to start bullying us or take over our corporations or fire us or abuse us, please let us know. We'd like the warning. So whatever your superpower is, there's this privilege, right, with it. And you think everybody in the world thinks like you do and has it, but we don't. Whether it's how to load a dishwasher better than everybody else, please do that. And don't expect us to know how to do that because you're a master at it. So I think that I feel a responsibility, I guess, with the cultural fluency that I have to give back in some way.
Love it. Now, speaking of success, how do you define that word? What does success mean to you?
But yeah, we've gotten around it in different ways already. Part of it has to do, I guess, with helping people be who they are and be fully yourself. So whatever strengths and gifts you've been given, that you live out of that, and that you're increasingly, as you grow older, living out of your strengths more and more to make the world a better place. But I think there's also sort of an element of like liberation within that, liberating yourself from all these expectations, these shoulds, and whoever you are, whatever culture you've been raised in and whatever religious environment you've been brought up in, there's a lot of shoulds. Women have an extraordinary amount of shoulds and rules, and our boxes can be very narrow, and the world can try to make us very small. So I think there's a lot of success can be a liberation from those things to say, this is me. And the more me you become, I think the more successful you become. So when I help people live and lead with both freedom and confidence to be who they are, I think that's success.
Love it. What would you say is one of the most important things you've learned in your life? And what was your life like before you learned it? And what was your life like after learning it?
There's been so many things. I've lived long enough to have had quite a few mistakes and learning from them. I tell my kids a lot, mistakes are teachers. I say it to my global team as well. I don't expect people to be perfect. I don't expect myself to be perfect. I hope we make progress. And I hope we keep helping each other move forward and be better versions of ourselves and all that. But I would say one key component probably is that boundaries protect purpose, especially in fast-moving, fast-paced cultures like Silicon Valley or like disaster relief. They're oddly similar in the sense that you can really burn out quickly, and it can be dangerous if you don't take care of yourself. But I think before I sort of learned and became confident enough to set boundaries and risk being seen as too rigid on certain things, especially in a work environment, it says, you know what, I'm not going to be on that call at 2 a.m. That's okay. I'm protecting my peace, my purpose, because I show up better for my team during the day. If it's an emergency, of course, but this is not an emergency. And protecting those boundaries protects purpose. And before I learned that, I think I was on the verge of being overcommitted and burning out in these fast-paced, rapidly changing environments, especially as a woman, or even we see a lot of stereotypes around women when we become moms that we're somehow lazy. I find this to be bizarre that women are ever viewed as lazy when they become moms, but it's true, and it's so ironic.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah, but they're seen as lazy or less committed at work because they have a baby, because there's these narratives that she just wants to be home, she hates being here, her mind is at home. But a man has a child and he gets a bump in pay. So it's this fatherhood bonus that men tend to get. So, puts pictures of his kids in his workplace. What a great dad. Oh, he's taking off early to go to soccer practice. That's so cute. He's such a good leader. But for a mom, she's always at soccer practice. My gosh, she never gets anything done. So it's the same thing, but just we view it differently. And so I do think that it's really important to have boundaries and to say, look, here's what I do. Here's how I do it. I'm getting my work done. Judge me on my outcomes. I'm working myself very hard, but I will not work myself into the hospital and burnout. So these are my boundaries. I'm only human. Let's be human-centered. Look at my outcomes. If there's an issue there, then we can have a conversation. But I wasn't strong enough earlier in my career to learn that. In fact, it took me way longer to learn that than I wish it would have.
Boundaries are very hard to learn. And you're going to piss off and upset a lot of people when you start to set boundaries.
You do.
Because they're so used to being able to encroach and push and push. And then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute. Lori's not giving in on this, or you know what I mean? Like it's people, there'll be a lot of people upset, but you have to protect your energy. You have to protect your health, because that's what it comes down to. Because then if you don't, you won't be able to show up for work at all, because you'll be hospitalized. You won't be able to perform. And then what? And then you're going to get fired because you're not coming in?
Yeah. And there's several industries, I think healthcare might be one of them too, where nobody's looking out for you. In that sense, no. You have to look out for. They will take everything you give them. They would take your blood too. They would take it all. Yeah. And so knowing that going in is no one is thinking about my well-being but me. I hope there's managers out there that are better than that. But if you go in with that posture, then you can protect yourself better. And I do believe there are many good managers out there. I try to be one who cares for my team and checks in with my team. How are you doing? There's ice raids going on. Are you stressed? How are you? All of that. And how can we balance workload? Oh, you've got this going on. Or can we shuffle that around the team? But not everybody has that situation. And even the best of managers, a lot of things. And so you really caring for yourself is number one.
Absolutely. What does the word empowerment mean to you, Lori?
I think a lot about power, and through the lens of people who have it more easily or are born into it, or people who don't. And I've read some great books over the years about it. One of my favorite ones is Redeeming Power by Dr. Diane Lamberg, who's done a lot of work with trauma. And she starts off that book. I had her on my podcast, and I got to meet her in person at a conference in Phoenix not long ago. But she has a part of the book at the beginning where she talks about even newborn babies have power. So a baby girl can cry in the night and wake up her parents. And her parents obviously have power. They have power to abuse her, to respond to her cries, to let her get dehydrated and not give her the milk that she needs. But her cry, her voice, her God-given voice is a part of her power. And that we were all designed and created with a voice. And that is a power that we have to speak, to use that. And so I really find that very beautiful and humbling, both as a parent, as one who was once a baby girl, and thank God my parents took care of my needs for milk, and my mom's a nurse, so she was always on top of it. But I also know that you can power over, or you can power with. There's a lot of ways to have power. Power is neutral, but how you use it matters. And so I think I'm much more interested in power with, and I'm very concerned and get a bit worried about power over when I see it take place, and the abuse of power for sure. So power with is something I'm much more interested in. So I think empowerment means that to me. It sort of means transferring power in a way that lifts others up sustainably. The Power of Giving Power Away is a book that I read a few years ago. One of my bosses recommended it. It was really good. But yeah, I think powering with is a beautiful thing to observe and to be a part of.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to jump into a little rapid fire section. So the next grouping of questions just be 1, 2, 3 word answer type thing, okay?
Got it.
How would you describe yourself in one word?
I think catalyst.
If you could teach the world one thing, what would it be?
I think that difference is a strength.
Okay. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Helping leaders become more themselves and liberators of themselves and others.
What is one thing you love about yourself that is not related to your physical appearance?
My cultural fluency, but I think also the resilience that has taught me, and the curiosity.
What is one thing you want but cannot buy with money?
I think it's once we have loved ones or our pets as well that have passed away, the time with them is gone. And there's no billionaire out there that could make that happen.
If you had a theme song that played every time you walked into a room, what song would it be?
I'm a little torn on this one because it depends on my mood, but
okay, give me both.
I'll have both. Yeah. So one is, it's a song written about the current Claudia Sheinbaum, who's the president of Mexico, and she's the first woman president. And so there's this singer, Viviera Quintana, and she wrote this song for her, and I love it so much because it's all in Spanish, but it means the chorus is, don't forget that you have the eyes of a woman. Don't forget that you have the mouth of a woman. Don't forget that you have the fight of women, and don't become tired of living large and being a woman. So I love that. I think it's such a great song. I know a leader's perfect, but it's incredible to be the first woman. She's really doing a great job in so many ways. But I think when I'm stressed, and my life can be stressful with the job that I do and all kinds of geopolitical shifts and wild things that happen. And so when I'm needing to just calm my nervous system, there's a song by Bobby McFerrin that I used a lot years ago when I was interviewing for jobs, and there was the COVID pandemic was going on. It was just a wild time. But on one of the boards I sat on, our executive director pointed it out to me, and he sings "The Lord is my shepherd," Psalm 23, which is a very calming, poetic song about being restored. And Bobby McFerrin, if you've ever heard of him, he does a lot of body percussion. Yes. He comes here to San Francisco every year, and he does interactive at Grace Cathedral. I always go to it. He does an interactive thing with the congregation, and we become part of the body percussion, and we make music together. It's so fun.
Very cool.
Yeah, but we do the Lord is my shepherd. He switches the pronouns of God to she pronouns, and so it's the Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need. She makes me lie down in green meadows beside the still waters. She will lead. She restores my soul. So it just feels like very mothering, restoring, green pastures, nature. When I need my nervous system to just calm, it's this very a cappella, cathedral sounding beautiful. I recommend it.
Love it. That concludes our rapid fire section. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. If you could take one feeling or one belief and bottle it up and give it to people, what would it be?
I think it's a mixture of somehow feeling that you radically belong in such a way as to where you can say what you need to say and your perspective it matters. And however it comes out, right or wrong, just that you feel so psychologically safe and belong so radically that you can just speak what you need to say.
Beautiful. If you could step into my shoes, what question would you have asked yourself that I didn't ask you?
I think it's probably something along the lines of, how have you healed what you didn't cause so that others don't have to carry it?
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so I get to answer it. Okay. Yeah. Nice. I would say therapy, like I mentioned. But also, I have my current therapist. I love her. I've learned so much from different therapists, different types of therapy they've done with me. A lot of body work, somatic, dialectical behavior therapy was the body keeps the score from trauma. And I had a traumatic experience in a workplace years ago with workplace bullying. And so I've learned to heal a lot, and being in nature has been a key part of it for me. But I also have a spiritual director. I have 2 executive coaches. I have mentors. I just sort of have this village of kind of my board of directors I've cultivated and brought around me to help me heal and me increase my self-awareness, because I think self-awareness is an essential leadership skill that if we don't do it, we project a lot of ourselves onto other people, and we can cause people a lot of harm. So there's a lot that's gone on in the world that has caused me harm that I'm healing from. I didn't cause it. But I'm doing the best I can to heal with these resources. And I do a lot of reading as well, and so that others don't have to carry it.
Kudos to you for having the self-awareness. That's a key piece of it, as you said. And to be able to find and bring in the people to surround yourself with to help you, it's so important. We all need that. We all need help and support from others.
We do. Absolutely.
What is an unexpected blessing or occurrence in your life that you're grateful for?
Yeah, I would just say being multilingual, it's opened countless doors.
I'm sure. What is one lesson that your career has taught you that you think everybody should learn at some point in their life?
I think the right work culture will grow you more than the right title or even a company that's maybe looks really well known on LinkedIn or your resume.
What is your why, Lori?
I really enjoy building bridges between cultures, worlds, identities, ideas, whether it's helping individual contributors in the managing floor be understood by executives in my company, or whether it's helping local Indonesians with the grassroots nonprofit I worked for in the tsunami time be understood by the UN efforts and bridging those. I really enjoy being a bridge builder.
What would you say is one of your biggest life lessons or teachable moments, and what did you learn from it?
So many things I'm learning from. But I would say probably one that stands out is staying too long in a toxic organization. And I learned that culture isn't neutral. It really can be toxic.
If you had the opportunity to sit down and have a 1-hour conversation with one woman, any woman in the world, who would it be and why?
I think you know what a fangirl I am of Jacinda Ardern. So we're just going to keep going with that. I just can't imagine what we would talk about. I would just sit there and listen the whole time and take every note I could possibly take. But I think she just embodies transformational leadership. She exemplifies empathetic, transparent, decisive leadership during crisis, from the Christchurch mosque attacks and then also to COVID-19 pandemic. Her global influence, I got to hear her speak. So I was one of many in a crowd at the California Conference for Women. And when I saw that she was going to be there, I just almost died because I was so excited. And she's championed inclusive, emotionally intelligent leadership on the world stage, very values driven as a leader. Her approach really aligns with trauma-informed, psychologically safe work cultures, whether it's in government or business or anywhere, and that she prioritizes human dignity. So deeply resonant with the experience I've had. And then I guess her decision to step down, it crushed many of us because we're like, no, stay. But she admitted she was burnt out. She was self-aware. And even in that, she was leading us to say, sometimes you step away, even when, her husband and everybody else, everyone in her life did not agree pretty much with that decision. But she knew herself, and her self-awareness was so incredibly strong that she did that. So her post-leadership career has also been incredibly impactful. So since stepping down, she's focused a lot on disinformation in our media, kindness and leadership, and then social impact on more of a global level.
Okay. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
I think I would say your voice is God-given and it fuels your purpose. So you don't need permission to speak. You don't need to tone police yourself to speak in a certain way that makes you look smaller or more palpable to those to whom inconvenient truths make them uncomfortable. And that people's lack of feeling comfortable about how you speak is really more about them than it is about you.
Love it. Lastly, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, your tribe, your people, your corner of the world, what would that last 30 seconds sound like? What words of wisdom would you impart?
I think I would say lead with empathy, learn to lead with humility, and really leave space, every space, more inclusive and more human-centered than you found it, because humans are sacred, every single one of us.
Beautiful. Lori, thank you so much for taking and making the time to be here with me today. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I am grateful to have had the opportunity to sit down and speak with you. Thank you for sharing the beautiful light you put out into the world, your wisdom, your insights, your knowledge. I am so grateful to have you as a member of the Empowerography community. Thank you for being here with me today.
It's been a true honor getting to know you. Thank you for being a great listener and empathetic and just supportive, and for everything you do to help shine your light and help others shine their light in the world. It's incredibly beautiful.
Thank you very much. I received that. Once again, my name is Brad Walsh, host of your Empowerography podcast. Today, my guest has been Lori Adams Brown. She is the Director of Global Talent Development, a board member, podcast host, published writer, and consultant to CEOs and CHROs. Thank you so much, Lori. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't yet, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share with all your friends. You can find me at visuphoria.ca, follow me on Instagram at Empowerography Podcast, and on Facebook at Empowerography. Please join me next time for another inspirational story from yet another amazing woman.